Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Retro Gamers Podcast, episode number 255. Larry here, and as you can see, I have a very special guest on the show this week. Very good friend of mine, Sean Law.
I'm so special.
You are special because this is the first time you're on.
Yes, I feel honored, even though I was worried because I don't retro game that much.
That's
My
okay. Yeah.
earliest console was an N64.
That hurts me personally because of my age. That's all.
Well, I had a NES, but it sat in the corner.
You used the word NES. I might have to throw you off the podcast now.
What?
It's NES. Okay.
It's a NES.
Now, if Anthony was here, he would probably lightly agree with you. But since I'm here and I'm in charge, it's not a NES. It's not a SNES. It's an NES or Super Nintendo.
Anyway.
Well, first, Sean, let me ask you, because this is your first time on the podcast. Yeah, let me ask you.
And I'm clearly an avid listener by the previous conversation.
Well, I appreciate the honesty at least. So, but before we get into the topic at hand, which I think is actually going to be a really fun topic to talk about, one I've been gearing up to talk about for a while, me and Anthony especially. But first of all right, fine. So your first system was an N64. Like, do you remember like your favorite game on the N64?
Oh, Rogue Squadron.
Really? Okay.
Oh my God. As a
game's
kid growing up
fantastic.
liking Star Wars, you're like, I get to fly the X-Wing.
You ever play pod? Yeah.
Oh, pod racing, yeah, that was good, but like flying the X-Wing though,
Mm-hmm.
like what more do you want to do than like I just flying around and making the wings open and close, and like I am Luke Skywalker.
I was more the pod racing. Like, I enjoyed Pod Racer, especially when I found out you can use both controllers. You can use like a dual controller. But no, definitely, and that series even went on with the GameCube, with like Rogue Squadron and everything. But all right, so a big Star Wars fan, which then led over to the N64 and the video game.
Yeah,
cool. Playing anything, like any video games you're playing now?
Yeah, I am still playing games. I did mothball my PS4, and I'm going strictly PC.
Oh, PC fan. Okay, we don't do much PC here, but definitely interested in it. Anything you recommend or playing right now?
Yeah, because I love PC games and I love management games specifically. A very, or not very, mildly controversial company, Paradox Interactive. I love their historical games. Crusader Kings 3, so much fun if you kind of like random dice systems in your management and a lot of chaos. Because okay, you're a king. And you start, I think you can start all the way back to Charles the Great.
Okay, so we're going back a while.
Yeah. And then you can go all the way up to just bordering on the Renaissance.
Oh, okay.
So there's a big chasm there, and you can basically, the map spans like border of Russia, China to Ireland. Actually, it goes all the way, I think, to Greenland. And then you're a king, you conquer religion, etc. But you play the family all throughout the eras. So your main thing is actually arranging marriages and dealing with the alliances and playing that whole Game of Thrones game of juggling with the AI and like making sure nobody's too upset with you. It's actually not like a conquer everybody like kill. It's a, when you get big enough and bloated enough, it's, make sure it's that people like you and will actually go to war for you.
Interesting. It's sort of like a game where, because I always say, if you're making everyone happy, you're doing something wrong. So
and that's the thing is like at a certain point of time, you have to pick very powerful alliances and subjugate people. And like, there's a whole fear system. It's a very complicated modern game.
Fear system. I like it. Knowing for as long as I've known you for fairly, for a while now, I can see how a game of chaos and rule might be right up your alley. So I can definitely respect that.
I don't know what you mean.
And as far as our topic at hand, which we'll reveal here in a few moments, I don't know if you've ever played any of those type of games that converted onto the PC. Right now, it could be a yes or no because we'll deep dive into it a little later.
Yeah, to a certain extent, because there's a lot.
Yes, no, absolutely. In fact, let's get into it right now. You know, when Anthony, first of all, the reason why Anthony's not here this week is because, well, by the time this episode dropped, he would have already ran the New York City Marathon, and most likely is still somewhere in Queens by the time this drops. So we might have to go out and find him.
He's at a bodega in Astoria.
Most likely if the race runs past it. But no, in all seriousness, we're happy for Anthony, and we're definitely we assume, as this episode airs before the race, that everything's gonna be wonderful for him. So good luck, Ant. Definitely, I'll be tracking you on the app, on the New York City Marathon app.
Best luck to you, dude.
So in finding a replacement, Sean stepped up, like, hey, ready for it, and knowing, because we talked about this in the past. Sean, you mentioned to me before, not an avid gamer as far as the stuff that we talk about, some of the older stuff, but you do play something that me and Anthony used to play, and people play today, and that is Dungeons and Dragons. And more the board game aspect, which is something me and Anthony always wanted to dive into, because Anthony's a huge board game fan. But we've definitely dealt with some D&D. First of all, what are some of your memories and history? Like, how far back do you remember playing Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, in terms of board games, there's that closet.
Oh yeah, look at all that right behind you. If you're watching on YouTube and Instagram TV, you definitely got a list there. Wow.
That's why when you said yo, what are we doing? I'm like, I got examples. I can talk. And I didn't even pull out all my books to talk about today, but in terms of memories, specifically with D&D and tabletop role-playing games, I started with the 3.5 red box when I was 12 or 13.
Okay.
My buddy had it. I was hanging over at his place, and it was literally the two of us played. I GM'd, he played all of the characters, I ran the scenario, and he tried to play, and that was my first exposure to D&D. And then after that, I started getting my own stuff, and then it became hard to find people that weren't like, what's wrong with you, weirdo?
Yeah, there was an error there. Not even an error, because we're and I'm not saying this in a bad way, we're different in ages, but it's not necessarily a matter of time, but it's a matter of age, that you do get to a point for a little while that's like, no one's playing right now. What's going on here? Maybe this isn't cool or something.
Well, there was another game that was in vogue, which was World of Darkness.
Okay.
Which I did get to play some of in summer camp. And I got to play Werewolf the Apocalypse and Vampire the Masquerade. And
these are all D&D like games?
They play similarly in terms of dice sheets.
Yeah, dice, stories. I got you.
Same format, but in terms of actual mechanical systems, wildly different.
Oh, I'm sure, because they need to be their own entities, but still.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And at what point did you really kind of find yourself going, all right, this is something that I'm loving, and now it's almost like you did, kind of like how one day all of this behind me with the pop vinyl started with just 3 of them to try and impress some chick, and now I have almost 500 of them. So
when we were looking at the book, and the book's like, tell your own story, I was like, I'm in.
And you are a storyteller, and a good one, might I add, from some of the stuff that I've experienced with you. So again, I can see how you fit in the D&D world.
Yeah, because and for the record, I'm currently running a campaign. We've been running since pre-COVID, meeting every Sunday.
Real one consistent story.
It started as World of Darkness. That did a full arc of almost 6 months.
Oh wow.
Capped it, went to D&D. That has been consistent.
All right, that's cool.
and we've basically done intertwining characters, world and theme and stuff. So the players have actually changed characters 3 times, but there's always been interconnecting themes, webs, and like NPCs to keep it all like in the same world.
It's like the Kevin Smith's View Askew universe. There's always a little bit.
Yeah, but it's like what happened in the last campaign. We're continuing that story from new characters' perspectives, dealing with the last characters' like what they did.
That's cool. I remember, early, probably, actually, I can pinpoint it almost. Probably 6th grade or so, maybe, is when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. Back in my neighborhood in Brooklyn, just a couple of kids started playing, and they invited me over one day. I'm like, let me see what this is all about. I played a couple of times.
What's this nerd shit?
Yeah, basically. And I'm like, and I wasn't even too cool for the room, trust me. But even I'm like, I don't know if I want to get into this, because also, and this might have been before your time, for a little while, Dungeons and Dragons, like, from a parent's point of view, and even from like a religious point of view for a while.
Oh, the Satan?
Oh, was damn near condemned, because I went to a
Catholic school.
Catholic school, yeah. So actually, I went to Catholic school from 1st grade all the way through high school until college.
They got that wonky, the wonky on the mind. Have you listened to the last podcast on the left of the Satanic Panic in D&D?
No, I didn't hear that one. I know of them, but I didn't hear it.
Check it out.
Well, there's been like there's been some like films. I'm pretty sure Tom Hanks' like first movie was like a D&D.
Yeah, it was
type.
About the
yeah.
Panic. He's like, I don't want to do it.
Basically, like, was at a school or something. Someone's like, "Hey, man, you want to come play some?" It wasn't Dungeons and Dragons, but a role-playing like game.
Yeah, it was a role-playing.
And then all of a sudden, it turns into LARPing, live-action role-playing, and here they are, getting ready to call Cthulhu, out of the ground.
Have you seen on Netflix Paradise PD?
Yes, I have watched it. Yes.
There's the best moment that I love of the Satanic Panic, where they have the deprogramming room for the kids.
Was that in the newer season?
It was in the newer season, I believe.
Okay, I'm trying to remember. I didn't watch all of it, but I'm not worried about spoilers.
I watched all of it.
Okay.
It's so, I love that show. It's so
first
stupid.
2 seasons were great.
It's so stupid.
Oh, totally.
They go and they're like, is it the Bible or is it D&D? And they're like, the witch of something something.
Yeah.
They're like, D&D. No, Bible. Then they go over, the witch of Agrimar is D&D.
Yeah.
The witch of this is Bible. And it's like, oh, the D&D is actually just like, anyway.
Yeah, it was. So for a while there was a stigma behind Dungeons and Dragons, and this is a game that came out in the late 70s. But parents at the time were just thinking, this is they're talking about demons and maybe Satan and casting spells and everything like that. And definitely in a Catholic school we weren't playing it there.
Well, it's really.
Like,
Sorry, it's really interesting just going into the philosophy side of it, because the reason you spell a word, look at the word spell and casting a spell. Mm-hmm. In the Latin way of using language is that words have power and meaning.
Oh,
and
totally.
Controlling language and thought, and there's the sin of thought, etc. So intention, when you go to mass, it is white magic. It is a belief of they believe they're what is it called? When the body and blood of Christ.
Well, first of all, the thoughts right now that of Sean, we're not going to deep dive into religion or anything.
Sorry, I'll pull it back.
No, it's okay. No, but you're heading towards something, and I'm not gonna cast you out for it. But I think I know what you're talking about as far as religion itself, and every religion is kind of like that.
Yeah,
where you can, it's
people at the time took it very seriously.
Exactly.
And so it's kind of understandable to understand, like, giving kids a book where it's like, say these words at a friend and potential malicious.
At one point, and I can say this easily, at one point the Bible was meant to be, verbatim, where later on, nowadays it's meant to be the stories. We know the earth is more than 5,000 years old. Those are all stories to teach us, yet there, historically speaking, there might have been a global flood because everyone talks about that.
Yeah.
So, but I see what you're talking about as far as where the concerns would be with parents who, no disrespect to parents from the 70s and 80s, not very knowledgeable, then maybe no, meaning like they didn't get it. You know, back then when you were an adult, you were an adult. You know what I mean? Like when I was younger, when I saw 40-year-olds when I was like 10, they wouldn't be playing video games. They wouldn't be watching cartoons. You know, not stuff that I do, stuff that you do. You know what I mean? You know, it was a world of difference. But it was crazy, though, how, and you were starting to mention it, how people got crazy over Dungeons and Dragons as far as the evil behind it.
Yeah, and a lot of it just also goes to the shifting times of like people now accept like people are always growing and changing.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, it's like once you're a man, you're a man. And like people stuck to their guns on stuff, and it wasn't like, and you were stuck in he's stuck in his ways.
Yeah, I got you. I got you totally. So I was sort of like with my beginning of Dungeons and Dragons. So I went to my friend's house, played a little bit, borrowed some dice. I didn't have my own. And then a shop opened up. I remember a shop opened up in my neighborhood that kind of started selling some D&D books, D&D dice. Well, at the time I called them D&D dice, not knowing they're really dice for almost anything. And then everyone eventually got that collection where you'd carry with you the little pouch of dice. There we go. There you got two of them. Oh, three? Maybe no.
Three.
Three. Look at that.
One of them just has a full D100 in it.
I was going to talk about those in a moment. I haven't seen one of those in forever. I remember I had yellow dice. I don't know why they were yellow. Just the ones I bought were yellow. And I had a yellow pouch. And I had your standard dice on it all the way up to a D20. And then I remember one day a friend of mine walked in with a D100 and we're all like, what the hell is that? Like, what could we possibly be rolling that we need a 100-sided die? And God help us, it actually helped out a lot during games.
Yeah, percentiles.
Yeah. So, and I remember like some stuff. I remember, I forgot what it was exactly, but all I remember is I would roll to see how drunk I would get, and the drunker I got, the more powerful I was. So I was a fairly powerful whatever it was. I doubt it wasn't a mage. Usually
sounds like a barbarian.
Yeah,
to me.
Any role-playing game, even like for video games, I always go for like the human or the barbarian to try and put myself into it as much as possible. You know, because if I'm an elf or an orc, I'm like, that's not going to work. So mentally for me. But yeah, I remember having so much fun with that. Like, did you to a point start collecting dice? Like all of a sudden find yourself with like, 1,000 dice?
So I lost a good chunk of my collection to an X.
Oh boy. I feel you.
I still got a decent, this is all like a variety bag.
Okay.
Of dice. I think there's only like 4 or 5 D20s in there in a different little hodgepodge. And then this is all just D10s for Vampire.
Oh, it's a D10 game?
It uses purely D10s. So that's
very cool. Very cool.
Just D10s.
Yeah, I remember too for a while that you have your D&D players or role-playing players who would stick with like mine are all blue, mine are all red, mine were all yellow. Then you have people who just mix and match because they like the feel of a die, even though none of them matched as far as color or design. And then I remember yeah.
The logic is you need as many as possible because when one starts rolling bad, the luck on it's worn out. Throw it into dice prison to get its recharge back. Get a new one out because hopefully it's got some luck juice in it. Start using that one. And
mine would be more roll off the table. My friend's dog would try and eat it. So I'm like, all right, let me just get another one. Let me just grab another one at this point. So all right, so Dungeons and Dragons, at what point, like how many people are in your campaign now? What's I remember we had maybe like 5 or 6 at most. 4. Okay. Do you feel that's comfortable
4.
enough?
Yeah, it's a very good mix of personalities, and it keeps things flowing very well because I'm able to give everybody a lot of individual attention.
Okay.
I've had games. The largest consistent game I ran was 7. The largest game I've ever ran was 12.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Do you tend to be the dungeon master?
Pretty much almost always.
Okay, so I was never DM. It wasn't me. I wasn't that quick in storytelling back then, or even now.
I started doing improv at a super young age, and I was always just like, let's play D&D, and they're like, who's gonna GM? And like I would just be like, I'm doing it, let's go, everybody sit down, here's your stuff, let's go, we're doing this.
Now, are you the DM you already had your book of stories, you had your outlines laid out? Like, how far did you go as far as physical? Because this is mostly the bare bottoms is pen, paper, and dice.
That's I got pen, paper, dice. You sit down at my table, you have your character sheet.
Yeah.
And my prep work is kind of a bullet point outline of the story and like a couple of monsters and NPCs to pull from.
Mm-hmm.
After that, I'm just kind of throwing stuff at you and see how you bounce off of it. Because my big planning is, it depends on you're doing a campaign or a one shot.
Yeah.
If you're doing a one shot, you do a little more rigid, build out the town, build out the world. If I'm doing a campaign, the world is very fleshed out, but the actual day-to-day beats are pretty loose.
All right. And you ever get to the point where you're drawing maps out on a grid paper, or even are you going out buying figurines and stuff like that?
So I have back there. I can get it.
Okay.
This was the greatest investment I ever made in high school.
Oh my gosh. What is that? Wow. I was expecting just like a notebookograph.
So
I was expecting like a notebookograph paper.
No, you don't need a notebook because this is erasable in leather. Or not leather, but like pleather.
Yeah.
And so, like, doing that all the time, just get some dry erase markers. So
that's
you can
awesome.
do like a map of the world, a map of the room they're in, and just go to town.
That's cool. That's cool.
I had minis. They're probably somewhere.
Yeah, but just in general.
I stopped using minis. I pretty much now only do theater of the mind.
Okay.
Style,
which I like.
Because I like throwing crazier stuff at people and bouncing more stuff off of people.
Mm-hmm. Instead of constantly using like a gelatinous cube or something like that.
As well as in terms of I've been playing D&D long enough where I know where my interests lie in terms of telling a story. So if you're playing in my campaigns, you're going to be basically a character in Game of Thrones.
Gotcha. Which kind of makes sense anyway. So
that's the level of shenanigans you're going to be getting up to, is like, it's going to be a lot of political intrigue and like talking to people and like trying to think about what's going on. It's not a lot of like go through the dungeon, fight the gelatinous cube, turn right, get the magic item.
Yeah.
It's going to be like figure out the mystery of who murdered this guy and why he murdered this guy, then go try to prove he murdered this guy to the court and stuff like that. It's
like you're bringing in Clue almost.
Yeah, I run very different games than like what people think of when you say the words D&D. That's why I really like World of Darkness, because it lends itself more towards that style of game.
Gotcha. And like the only other dice game that we played, me and Anthony, because we grew up together, that we played was a wrestling one, actually, one based on WWE, which is funny because Anthony, being the literary hoarder that he actually still had that book. We showed it a few episodes ago, probably a couple months ago, of his book. Like, he was the GM, and we each had a different wrestler, and it would play kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, like some of these other games that you're mentioning, where it's dice based, and you play your character, and then you roll. And I never won a match, God help me. My dice were terrible. I should have just thrown them away, but I never learned my lesson.
That's why you got to get the big collection. So when the luck wears out, you got to go put it to the side.
That was my fault. Please, nowadays, the stuff that kids and adults and players have nowadays, like, I would have had all this stuff. Like, what is it? Like a dice tower.
I need to get a dice tower.
Which I guess just randomizes more, the dice as they bounce down this tower and then roll out. But I think that's more for show than anything else.
50-50.
Yeah, depends on, it's mentally and physically. But to talk a little bit about actually the history of D&D, I got it right here. The game started again in 1974 was the original game. 77 Advanced D&D came out. Then you had your second edition in 81, your third edition in 83. Excuse me, let me stand corrected. Third edition was 2000.
Yep.
Fourth edition was 08, and currently the OG Dungeons and Dragons game is currently in its fifth edition, which came out in 2014.
So I got my fourth edition books.
There you go. Look, now this is what I want to talk about, because the literature that comes with having to learn, you buy a video game, you get one little manual, and you figure it out on the fly. I'm not doing all this reading for Dungeons and Dragons.
This is the core rule books for 4E.
That's 3 full books. That is insane.
And then this was my favorite campaign, Eberron.
Okay.
And so this is what we had beside us in 2008.
Yeah. When nowadays, I'm sure it's all online, but
it was part of it was online then.
Oh, really?
They had a program that allowed you to create your characters.
Oh, okay.
They had all of this on a generated program you could pay money for download.
Mm-hmm.
And it would do some of the work for you, but they still do old school. I mean, one of the biggest competitors, company called Paizo, does Pathfinder.
Okay.
They do a game more that's along the lines of 3.5. All of their stuff's online for free.
Oh, wow.
People just pay for the books out of the love and support.
There you go. That's a way of doing it. But yeah, I remember the books. When I worked in a bookstore, sometimes we get some kids coming in like, do you have a Dungeons and Dragons book? I'm like, no, we just carry college textbooks, but I can probably try and order it for you. And then like just looking into it, and I had already been out. Like I stopped playing Dungeons and Dragons probably right before I went to high school. And I remember it vividly the day I stopped playing D&D. I went to my friend's house, who was normally the dungeon master. I'm like, all right, setting up, getting ready, got my dice. Blah, blah, blah. I'm on one end of the table. He's on the other end of the table. I'm like, all right, when's everyone else coming? He's like, oh, no, it's just me and you. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, we're doing it's only me and you're the dungeon master? He's like, yeah, it's just one player. Thank you. It's been fun. I've enjoyed this game. I'm putting my dice down and I've officially retired. And that was the last time I played a true D&D game.
That's one-on-one D&D worked when getting into it at like 13. I wouldn't do it nowadays.
And I was about 13 or 14, and I was like, nah, I can't do this anymore.
I've recently run, as a side offshoot to a current campaign, a 2-player session where it was me and 2 other people.
But at least it's 3 in total. You know what I mean? The dungeon master and then 2 players, which is fine because you can still bounce off of each other with the players.
Yeah.
But it's just me and the dungeon master. I'm like, I just don't want to do that.
But I've offered players, like during the last World of Darkness campaign, I said, if you want to do a one-on-one session to do side stuff with your character, I gave them that option.
Okay.
But that was like, it wasn't a normal thing. It was a like, if you want to like betray the party or do something weird, here's an option. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So Dungeons and Dragons, again, been around for a while. Some other things I want to mention real quick as far as the lore of D&D. Certainly you have the board game. We're actually going to touch on some of the video games in a little bit. But this thing also made it to like mainstream television and movies. I don't know if you remember the old, well, this would be more in reruns for both of us, the old Dungeons and Dragons cartoon.
I know it exists.
Yep. I don't know if it's streaming anywhere right now. It's actually made by Marvel, co-production of Marvel Productions and the original owner of D&D, TSR. It ran for 3 seasons, 27 episodes over 3 seasons. So you do the math on the syndication rights. But some of the names that are in it, obviously you got your Peter Cullen and your Frank Welker, who were in everything from Transformers.
Yeah.
They were, to every other cartoon in the 80s.
Those are names. What are
Also, from Charles in Charge, Willie Ames was a voice in the show. And from Happy Days, Donnie Most, amongst some other ones. And it was fun because the cartoon is what I always... So, and we've talked about it on the podcast, me and Anthony, when it comes to adaptation, whether it's TV or film adaptation of video games, to me, the best way of doing it would always be have the player get sucked into the game, and then that's the storyline. And that's kind of what happened in the cartoon. Kids were playing the game and they get sucked into the game, and now they're living D&D. So that's why I always enjoyed it. Again, it's 27 episodes, a short run if you ever find it anywhere. It's fun to watch. But then Hollywood stepped in. Oy. And we got 3 movies which just eventually went from big budget Hollywood to high school AV club. As far as I think the quality. Do you remember the original Dungeons and Dragons movie from 2000?
No.
You don't remember that?
I know it happened. That was one of those ones where like me and my friends looked at it and went, I think we have better things to do with our time.
Some of the big names: Marlon Wayans, Thora Birch, Jeremy Irons, just to name a few.
Jeremy Irons was in there?
Jeremy Irons was in the movie, but it was in the realm of Dungeons and Dragons, so it wasn't, again, like someone getting sucked into the board game. It was in the realm of D&D, and it's one of those situations where if you don't play the game, you're gonna miss a lot of the references
Nods
and stuff.
References and stuff.
Kind of like in the new Uncharted trailer that came out. The movie with Spider-Man in it. The scene of him falling out the back of the...
it is a very iconic sequence that unless you played the game, you wouldn't actually get.
Which I never played the game, funny enough. And I'm like, and then someone compared it. I'm like, wow, that's straight out of there. That's cool. But nevertheless, Dungeons & Dragons was a flop in the theaters, but kind of got love on the home turf of it. There was a sequel, and I remember this, a made-for-TV sequel, Wrath of the Dragon God, which came out on Sci-Fi in 2005. And then, which I think I vaguely remember watching. And then there was a third movie, which only came out in England, apparently. The Book of Vile Darkness, released in 2012. But we are getting a reboot. There is going to be a reboot movie set for 2023.
Here's the thing, is there's one, like, big entryway. I'm not sure if you have it on your notes. Do you have the Dragonlance series on there?
I can look it up real quick.
So Dragonlance is a book series that is basically a friends group D&D campaign that they turned into a series of novels.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And
okay.
It's so prolific it became D&D canon, more or less, soft canon.
Mm-hmm. I do. Yes, some of these names actually sound familiar, like Heroes of the Lance, Dragons of the Flame. Some of that sounds familiar. Champions of Kryn, Dragon Strike. So,
but like some of the characters out of that have become D&D characters and characters in video games.
See, that's cool. I like when that happens. That's pretty sweet.
That to me is like when I think of D&D in media, I think of Dragonlance. Mm-hmm. I also, more modern, think of like a lot of the Let's Plays on Twitch.
That's what I want to talk about next is, when Twitch came out, as much as Twitch originally was just more video game, like actual video game play, there are a lot of D&D channels, which I have watched.
So there's like 2 of big daddies to me. Mm-hmm. Number 1 was, Penny Arcade, right?
Yes.
Penny Arcade was originally approached like 2008 with 4th edition, I think, to do a Let's Play podcast. And they did a full pure audio. And then they started doing live video recordings at the PAXs of them playing D&D. Mm-hmm. And then came Critical Role.
Okay. Critical Role I heard as well, yeah.
Critical Role just took things to a whole nother level. Because it was professional voice actors all sitting around a table together.
That's not the one. Is Joe Magliano? Because he's huge into D&D. Is he part of that one?
He's probably been on it at some point.
He's actually one of the catalysts for the reboot. Like, he's trying to get that going, the rebooted movie. Because he's huge into D&D.
I don't think he's like one of the weekly guys.
Gotcha. He might have his own thing. I might be getting confused. I apologize.
Yeah.
But still, watching people play, and you have to believe that the game also kind of may have lent itself to the pandemic, for people to do something, because when let's talk about it. The pandemic hit, the world just shut down, and nothing was going on, nothing was happening. I'm talking about when it started, like March, April, through the summer of 2020. But a game like Dungeons and Dragons could be done over Zoom like we're doing right now.
Well, not even just
Skype.
over Zoom. There were a ton of resources pre-existing to do it digitally. There's a thing called Roll20 that I use weekly to play with my players.
Okay.
That's been around for years. That I've played with people in Japan, Europe, all over the world. And you can use it to find groups. I've played with random people, random games all over. Like this is the thing. If you want to get into this, just start Googling. You'll find, like, you want to play a cyberpunk game, go like Shadowrun whips ass. It's wild. So like that's the whole thing, is you're gonna find like a weird Norse dude who's just gonna be like, so then the computer hacks your brain and the computer's being run by a dragon and you die.
Roll for favor. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
We can continue to go on and on about the board game itself. I do want to touch on some of the gaming, like the video games of it, and we are not at all going to be able to touch on like the history of D&D video games, because there have been a number of D&D games. But let me ask you, do some of these things, I don't know if they sound familiar to you just from playing the board game, like Gold Box, Infinity Engine, Aurora Engines, Dark Alliance, does that sound like anything from the board games?
Dark Alliance sounds vaguely familiar. I mean, we should probably talk about Baldur's Gate.
Well, that's what I'm going to get into in a moment, yeah. But I think what happened was some of these engines, for lack of a better term, I'm not sure what that might mean, might be the stories, like the story arcs that multiple games come out in. Maybe. I'm just guessing.
Dark Alliance.
Like Gold Box, Pool of Radiance, Eye of the Beholder. Eye of the Beholder I've known for a while.
Oh, those are the
like offshoot storylines?
Yeah, kind of offshoot storylines. Or they're the like Eberron is. It's like the world and kind of the rule sense.
Okay,
like
I gotcha.
The separate side expansion with this is the monsters. This is the special flavor that goes. So like Eye of the Beholder. Yeah, okay.
Because Eye of the Beholder is like the first game I remember, and that came out on the Super NES, the Sega CD, the Amiga home computers back in 1990. I remember always seeing Dungeons and Dragons Eye of the Beholder. There was an advanced D&D game back on Atari, which I've never ventured to play, not even today. Not because it's on Atari. I would totally play an Atari game. It's just I feel like the rule set would be above and beyond my capability right now, even as a 41-year-old. Having to just get into it.
I just feel like an Atari would have a hard time doing all that math.
No, Atari. Well, they might do it in a different way, but Atari's a strong little system. But Eye of the Beholder, I definitely remember seeing those. My history, though, as you just mentioned before, Baldur's Gate. And that's really the game. And there's been standalone Baldur's Gate and Baldur's Gate 2.
Yeah.
Which you can actually, they are available on current gen consoles to get. You can buy them, Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Yep. But the one I've played and the infamous story that Anthony's told about is with Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance.
Yes.
And that game was probably, my opinion, besides like the arcade D&D game, which never really came out on home console till later, Dark Alliance I think was probably like one of the more popular games for a home console that D&D put out, because I remember a lot of people playing Dark Alliance.
Yeah. And then, I mean, there's also the whole thing of like Golden Axe is basically a D&D ripoff.
Oh, yeah, totally. But Golden Axe in itself is one of the best arcade games, one of the best Sega Genesis games of all time. But yeah, you can see that, when something becomes so popular, listen, you can't help but have it ripped off sometimes, or homages, you know what I mean? Or, loving tributes to it. It's going to happen when something gets that popular.
Yeah.
So, but I remember with Dark Alliance, so I played Dark Alliance mostly on GameCube. It was just a straightforward hack and slash, which you can say lent itself from Diablo.
Yeah.
Heavily. In fact, that's a whole other thing, Diablo, I got to talk about because I can't wait to download the new one. I just haven't done it yet. Diablo 2, the remaster.
The remake, yeah.
Yeah. But Dark Alliance was just his forward hack and slash RPG, which I had a blast with. I never beat it, shocking. But the story that Anthony always tells is with him and his roommate were playing Dark Alliance. They went all the way. They get to the end of the game of Dark Alliance. They beat the game. And the ending is just like, for the full story, play Dark Alliance 2 coming soon. Like it was an advertisement for the second game, and they were like, I'm never playing this again. So
that is fantastic.
And of course, again, they re-released Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance as a remaster. So that's available on current gen systems.
Yep.
And then the brand new D&D Dark Alliance, which came out earlier this year, I believe. Again, in the Baldur's Gate series for current gen consoles, and that game looks wild.
Have you touched Divinity Original Sin?
I have not. No, where is that?
That's PC.
See, I'm not a PC player. That's the thing. I'm not a fan of PC. I'm not condemning it. I gotta have a controller and a console.
So the
definitely
big one
talk about it. Yeah.
The second game, which actually does have, I think came out on consoles and has great controller support. Does D&D so well. So well. It is a real good like Baldur's Gate style kind of throwback, to the extent where they actually made a full tool set where you can run your D&D campaigns in the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they allowed for a dungeon master to live run the game.
Oh, there you go.
Turn-based 4 players.
Wow.
No, it's a fantastic game.
What is it called again?
Divinity Original Sin.
Divinity.
2.
Okay.
Let me make sure I get that correct.
And I want to while you do, I want to make a slight correction. The Advanced Dungeons and Dragons game I was talking about was not Atari; it was in television. So before people start yelling at me like they usually do, that was on in television. Still, I remember seeing the box and everything like that. D&D again. D&D lent itself to probably lightly lift from the Lord of the Rings series, and I'm sure. Game of
Lord
Thrones.
of the Rings, not Game of Thrones. More, it had to do with Conan the Barbarian and H.P. Lovecraft, like Call of Cthulhu mythos.
Okay.
Those were the two real sort of nucleuses. Tolkien was kind of in there because of elves and dwarves and all that stuff, but the actual dungeon delving was definitely more Conan the Barbarian inspired.
I can see that. I can definitely see that.
Because I really love Conan the Barbarian. I have a lot of the old magazine short stories.
Oh, really?
They're really fun to read. And when you read them, every single adventure is different. He's like, oh, he's a pirate now. Now he's a king. Now he's this. And it's always like he has to go get a magic item. There's an evil wizard. There's an evil monster. It's when you read the short stories, it's like reading like one of the books for D&D. Oh. When you read Tolkien, it's like reading Tolkien.
If you're reading Conan, do you have Arnold Schwarzenegger's voice in your head?
Not at all.
See, I would, unfortunately.
Because Conan in the books is nothing like Conan.
I've heard, actually. A buddy of mine is a huge Conan fan, and probably likes Conan as well. He's told me that. He's like, the book is like almost totally different than the movie.
The books are really incredible. It's actually really fascinating piece of history because they're actually surprisingly feminist and progressive. And then he started hanging out with H.P. Lovecraft, and then he got racist and sexist.
Oh, okay.
He was also made sexist because of like the industry at the time was like, we need more nudity to sell magazines and stuff. So it's interesting to see how his style went from like surprisingly progressive to surprisingly transgressive to not transgressive, but regressive to like he got he evolved again, and he did it all in a very short amount of time.
He's like a terrible Pokemon.
It's like his second form is real bad, but also like real good. Like there's some real fun stories in that second period.
Oh, I'm
of
sure.
his writing.
Yeah, some of them can still be fun.
I mean, it's like the stories get like, you can see he's just cranking them out for the magazine to get paid during the Great Depression, but they're just like, okay, what's this adventure? Girl with big boobs captured by snake. What's the next one? Black girl with big boobs captured by pirates.
Print it, sell it. We're good. So, all right. And yeah, and look, this is just going into this podcast. I know we can't, we're just literally skimming the top of this world of not just Dungeons and Dragons, but role-playing games. And
I have other a series of other games. We haven't even touched on the Call of Cthulhu game, horror tabletop games, sci-fi games, war games. I got so much more.
Oh, I'm sure, to a point where I definitely, because we're going to start to wrap this up. No, totally. I want to wrap this up before we start deep diving into something else, and we'll have time for it. But absolutely, Sean, I want you back to talk about the role-playing aspect, even with Anthony. Once we get Anthony back, because like I said, he's big into board games, not as much, I don't think, the RPGs. He doesn't really tell me that he plays role-playing, but to have you back to talk about it, to show us some more stuff, and I gotta say, Sean, this has definitely been awesome. It's been fun, and it's, like I said, it's been something I wanted to talk about for a while, and it got me remembering why I loved playing D&D and some of those offshoot games, like I said, like the wrestling game that we played, and even a little bit like I don't know if you ever played HeroClix. Have you ever seen those?
Yeah, I was gonna bring those.
Oh, okay. No, let's talk about that, because we played that. Me, Anthony, and our buddies back in Brooklyn. I mean, when we discovered HeroClix, forget about it. It took over. I mean, the amount I remember, and again, this is all from just my experiences. We ordered like a crate of HeroClix boxes. So it was a box of 30 boxes of 5 boxes each. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? We pulled together. We had it delivered to my house. And then everyone came over. I remember my parents put out some snacks and everything. And we just sat there and we kind of went in order, just picking boxes and then start trading. Me and Anthony have a very infamous story of a unique Joker. So folks, Sean, could you explain HeroClix maybe real quick for those who just don't know what it is? And what are these two idiots talking about?
Is a war game. You're basically given a mat or a preset mat you put down on the table, and the objective is to purely attack and defeat your opponent using miniatures. And on the bottom of the miniatures is a rotating dial that tracks damage, and with the changing damage, usually these stats will change for the thing. So if you attack the Hulk will probably get stronger.
Exactly.
If you attack Spider-Man may get weaker.
And hence the term HeroClix is when you turn it, you get an audio click. I think it came with a ring or something to turn it at first, just to enhance the gameplay, whatever. So I might even still, I don't have my HeroClix anymore. I might still have though not the Juggernaut. Oh, what were the oh my God, what were the giant things in X-Men? The robots,
Sentinel.
Sentinels. Yes, I had a Sentinel. A giant Sentinel. Wow. Remember, I think it took up four spots on the board or something. So yeah, we went all in with these HeroClix because they all were Marvel and DC fans. And then we were trading, and then Anthony wanted my unique Joker. Something happened. Next thing I know, he shook his hand and he just took my Joker. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh no, this was a handshake agreement. I'm like, I'm sorry, what? I got nothing out of it. And unique Joker was hard to find. Uniques were, each base had a different color, and uniques were silver. Mm-hmm. And they had the most powerful form of that character. And I remember Unique Joker was powerful.
The thing about those, the click games, was they were trading card games with miniatures.
Oh, totally. Because you'd buy a box of 4. You don't know what's in them. So, I mean, the multiples was ridiculous that we would have. And yes, you would trade them back and forth. But yeah, he got that Joker, and
if you got a Spider-Man, you were king of the playground.
And then that started evolving, but then we started going on separate ways and everything like that. So we lost interest, not interest, we just stopped playing for a while. And then I remember when I moved out here, there's a comic book store not too far from me, the Comic Book Depot. And
I pass it when I go to your place. Yeah. Every time I'm like, I should go there.
It's not bad. But they had, for the first time in a long time, I saw a new one. They had the Batman 66 Hero Clicks. I was like, that's pretty cool. So I bought a pack just to have, you know, because even if you want to collect them. And then I showed my friends and they're like, you know, I still have my clicks. I'm like, I still have a box of mine. And then for maybe like 3 months, we got together again and started playing. And then it fell off. You know, everyone has families and everything. And next thing you know, everyone's pretty much sold all their clicks. Mine are, again, long gone. But
Hero Clicks is better than the true crack addiction. I'll bring one last thing out.
Okay. Well, I'm a little upset that, real quick, while you're doing that, I'm upset that we lost track of Hero Clicks because then WWE put out their version of Hero Clicks, and I'm so mad. We stopped playing before that. I should collect them though. I never did that. I should collect them.
You ever mess with Warhammer 40K miniatures?
Don't even get me started on Warhammer. Oh wow, that's actually that's elaborate. Did you put that together or?
Yeah,
you just
I'm too lazy to paint.
I was gonna say he's got to paint it. Showing a truck, looks like it's from Mad Max.
Oh, there's a little guy on the bottom. There we go.
Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, no, Warhammer I never got into. Though by my job, you know, when I used to work in a building, there was a store that opened up and it was like a gaming store. That's pretty cool, like a little motorcycle. Yeah, those Warhammer figures. And I went over to it because I thought it was like a gaming store, but no, it was essentially a Warhammer store.
It was, yeah, no, I know exactly the place you're talking about.
Yeah, over by Plainview.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I've been there a couple times. Yeah. The stench is horrendous.
Well, you know, you get that when you go to places like that or a Comic-Con or something. You know, you get used to it. But I remember walking in. I'm like, this is only Warhammer? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, I never even realized Warhammer was that popular. As I'm looking around this store, and it's just purely Warhammer.
Yeah. No, I went to college, and like that was the big thing with those guys. They would take up like a barn and put up like terrain, and that would be like their night into part of the morning.
Oofa. Yeah, I'll ask you one last question. You ever get into like Magic or anything, The Gathering or anything like that? Anything card based?
I don't like math that much.
Me too. So I'm with you on that one.
I dodged that crack addiction. However, I have friends that love the cardboard crack. That is Magic the Gathering.
Right before my senior year, I remember watching kids in the cafeteria. I'm like, what is this? It's a game called Magic. I'm like, that's not going to last. Who wants to play with cards?
No, Magic the Gathering. I knew one kid in college who paid for his college with Magic tournament earnings by selling cards.
I believe
and doing tournaments.
I believe that. It's like the Pokemon, Pokemon card game.
He's an accountant. He's a brilliant accountant. He went and he did scholarships. Then he'd go do tournaments, clean up, get rare cards from drafts and stuff.
That's cool.
And then flip them.
That's wild. I can never do that. But still, nevertheless. Now, yeah. So, and you know what? This just now even opened up more for stuff to talk about later on now with Hero Clicks and with Warhammer and stuff like that. So, Sean, this is the first time. It is absolutely not going to be the last time. As we wrap it up, Sean, do you have anything? Do you do anything? Do you do other podcasts with me?
Yes, I do another podcast that I think we're both mutually associated with. It's called The Ring Crew. We record intermittently.
Yeah. True.
But usually around major wrestling events, we talk about all wrestling promotions. Usually the big ones, WWE, AEW. But we try to talk about everything, and we talk about the news and everything going on in the wrestling world. It's a good time. It's funny. It's a loose talk. And it's a nice time.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find us wherever you listen to podcasts, called the Ring Crew Podcast. We try and do live chats during Raw, SmackDown, Dynamite.
Oh, yes, on Facebook.
On Facebook, yeah. Join our group, the Ring Crew Podcast group. But as I get older, it's just harder and harder to stay up late. So I'm sorry, Rampage, but I'm trying. I'm trying to stay awake.
I Don't even try and I rarely do it because I go to sleep super early and wake up super early because my job requires me to open the business.
There you go. Well, when we start talking about stuff like GCW, that's when you come in. So
I will be awake.
Yes. And with us here at the Retro Gamers Podcast, of course, you can find us anywhere you're listening to If you're listening to us now, you already know where to find us. And you can watch us on YouTube, on Instagram TV. Email us, email@theretrogamers.com. And please definitely hit us up in the DMs or in the comments, your favorite RPGs, your memories and histories of Dungeons and Dragons specifically. We definitely want to hear about that. Sean, again,
I want to know about the time you summoned Satan with D&D.
That will be a whole nother episode. That's probably the day I met Anthony, to be honest with you. So we can talk about that later. Sean, again, thank you very much for joining this week. It was a great pleasure having you.
I definitely want to come back if you'll have me.
No, I absolutely will. And of course, again, Anthony running the New York City Marathon. So if you see a marathon runner pass that on the street, it's probably him. Please give him a hand. And folks, we will catch you everywhere next week on the Retro Gamers Podcast.
Peace.